The leg attacks in judo and wrestling are radically different because in wrestling, they were developed to a much higher level because it's an anatomical grappling sport. With the lapel, there's so many more ways to stuff the leg attack by with grip holds, the friction. The lapel creates a ton of friction. So it just makes it so much harder to get in and through the arm defense and snatch at those legs effectively. Wrestling has a full stride shoot on legs, where the classic move is to step out forward with your lead leg, almost or nearly touch your knee down as you swing the other leg through for it's called the giant step or giant stride. There's a lot of different terms for it. The basic wrestling shot. That doesn't exist in judo. In judo, they only snatch for legs. They don't put their legs down. They don't slide in. They don't dive. They actually just lower their level a little bit and reach out with their arms and snatch for legs. Or it's used as a counter. But either way, the big difference is the snatch or the shoot. Wrestling has snatches and shoots, whereas judo basically relies entirely on the leg snatch, mostly as a counter. And finally, it falls out of favor in judo because with lower scores, the leg snatch can be used to just knock a guy over, get a couple low scores, then back away, be boring, and win the match. Nobody wants that. A huge problem and why it's so easy to back away and be defensive in judo is the edge of mat criteria. Unlike freestyle wrestling and Greco-Roman that have a sharp, like life and death score if you step off the mat, in judo, it's really nebulous. You can actually get penalized for stepping off the mat or pushing someone off the mat. So it's completely up to the referee to interpret the intention, and that makes it way too nebulous and mushy of a criteria. Most of the time, the referee just says, okay, mate, restart, stop, restart, whenever they go off the mat. So it's like folk style wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you can just slide off the mat over and over defensively, and it's up to the referee to actually get involved in order to stop that. It's a shame because a clear edge of mat criteria score eliminates these problems. Just look at freestyle and sumo, for God's sake. A lot of us that have been involved with both sports believe the more controversial interpretation of judo, IJF and IOC's rendition of judo. Real judo is not what they're showing you on TV here. That's a martial art. It's completely different. But the IJF IOC interpretation of judo has long systematically and carefully tried to eliminate wrestling tactics. Basically, they were always concerned that wrestling was going to be eliminated from the Olympic schedule. And if it did, in these Soviet bloc countries, these big public sports gyms, they train wrestling and judo under the same roof. So they're good at both. If you take away judo, or if you take away wrestling from them, they're just going to put on the judo gi and come over and do their best to beat your judoka. The IJF and IOC were concerned about this because the wrestling powerhouses were smaller or less developed countries largely. Some of your bigger countries like Iran and Russia are great powerhouses in wrestling, but they're not marketable to all that American garbage, right? It's really hard to sell cheeseburgers to them, especially with the legal blockade and stuff like that. So basically, wrestling was way less marketable. The marketability, advertisers were not interested in buying space on your wrestling broadcast. They are in judo because judo's popular in Western Europe, Asia, and Latin America. So judo's got a much wider net than wrestling. So basically, originally, the leg attacks were completely different in both sports, but they were still effective to win in judo when they still had the lower scores. The IJF and IOC saw wrestling on the Olympic chopping block and said, whoa, we've got to do everything we can to keep wrestlers out of judo, or this whole sport, everything we built is going to be destroyed just by ugly leg snatches and shots. Well, that was probably the catalyst for the leg ban of 2010, and it changed the sport today. Unfortunately, a lot of people have not been able to get their own judo organizations going with real momentum despite great efforts. And IJF and IOC judo is all there is at the Olympic level, and at the world championship level, the rule sets are the same. So one day maybe we'll get freestyle judo in the Olympics and Kosen judo in the Olympics. That would be awesome. But as it stands, we're just going to have to live with what we have.